distinguished participants, I would like to welcome very cordially President Shimon Peres, President Mahmoud Abbas, and Secretary John Kerry, who joined our closing session and whom I will have the honor to introduce later. This is not just a closing session. I want to highlight the importance of this session and its significance, being devoted mainly to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. To create a framework for this session, we want to share first with you, with all of you in this hall and beyond, a call for action to break the impasse. This call has been prepared over the last 12 months, in many meetings, joined by our Israeli and Palestinian friends. This call for action from over 300 key business and societal leaders from both Israel and Palestine, representing large parts of the economy, is a powerful and represents a powerful mainstream constituency to accelerate and support the political process. This call for action in no way has the ambition to substitute the political process, but it wants to support this process, and it wants to underline the urgency to break the impasse. The World Economic Forum and I myself are very honored to have nurtured this initiative by prominent societal stakeholders from Israel and Palestine, and of course we fully support and will support this initiative also in the future. I would like now to call on two very prominent business leaders from Israel and Palestine, Yossi Vardi and Munib, to join me here. They are the spokesmen of the group which is comprised of so many who have contributed to the work, and I would like you to share your thoughts. Please join me on the podium, and I would like to just to show what support this initiative has. I would like all those Israelis and Palestinians and also regional leaders who have participated in breaking the impasse initiative in the weeks before and today, just to stand up for a moment so that we can recognize you.
His Excellencies, Mr. Schwab, Secretary Kerry, last year I've celebrated my 70th birthday. In 1967, when the conflict began, I was a 25 years old young man full of hopes and ambitions. When I look back, I see that most of my life, 45 years, were spent witnessing the conflict between us and our neighbors. It is too much, too long, and too painful. There is almost not a single Israeli or Palestinian family that didn't pay a heavy and bitter price. Too many mothers in both sides shed too many tears. Enough! During the entire last year, During the entire last year, a group of civic society Palestinian and Israelis worked closely together, trying to find a way and how they can help accelerate the talks towards creating two states for two people living side by side in dignity, peace, security, justice, and prosperity, to put an end to this conflict once for all. How we, the civil society, can support our leaders in achieving this complicated task. In the beginning, we were few, but very quickly, many others joined. The group we have brought together today in front of you consists of some of the leading business people, top executive, academicians, security and negotiation experts, and others. My Israeli partners, who have come from multitude of opinions, are from the left and the right political spectrum, secular and religious, with different views and persuasions. However, we are all united by our strong desire to see an end to the conflict and move towards a two-state solution, where mothers will be joyous and kids will not think about wars, but about education, productivity, business, and social justice. This will be a long road. We had to build trust among ourselves. We had to recognize that each side has its own narratives as to the reasons and the backgrounds of the conflict. We knew that we are unable to breach these narratives. So we decided to concentrate on focusing on moving to a better future. In the beginning, we were few, but today, after a year of intensive work, we are presenting to you a community of over 300 people, Israeli, Palestinians, and international leaders, which are all united in their desire to help putting an end to the conflict. We believe that this can be done, and the civic society can contribute to it. We are part of this silent majority which decided that we don't want to be silent anymore. We would like to assist our leaders in their quest for peace. We are not here to submit a peace plan. This is the role of the leaders, and only they can do the painful compromises which will be needed in order to move the process. But we are here to encourage them and to do it and to express loud voice support when they do it. We think that the civic society has a role to play. It cannot sit on the sidelines anymore and be a passive spectator. Our voice should be heard, and it will be heard, loud and clear. In the forthcoming months, we intend to continue and intensify our effort. All of it could not have been happened without the commitment and the leadership of the World Economic Forum and its chairman, Professor Klaus Schwab. For at least the last 20 years, this organization, an independent and impartial meeting ground for world leaders in government, business, and civic society, didn't spare an effort to strive for a solution in the Middle East. This process started here. Meetings have been convened, back-channel discussions have been held, secretive meetings took place at all times. The forum has acted as an honest, constructive, committed, and helpful broker. Thank you, Mr. Schwab. I would like to give a special thanks to Miroslav Dusek, Mirek, and his team for the fantastic work they are doing. All of this wouldn't happen without hundreds of wonderful Palestinians and Israelis who rose and stood up and joined and supported this initiative and are willing to be involved. Many of them took very active role almost on a daily basis, and I cannot mention them all. But I would like to mention some of them. My partners from the very beginning, Danny Rothschild, would you please stand up? Shmuel Meitar, hold your applause, please. Shmuel Meitar, stand up. Benny Landau, Yadin Kaufman, Danny Gillerman, Itamar Rabinovich, Miriam Sela, Ruth Cheshin, Avi Gil, and last but not least, the wonderful Mike Herzog, who didn't spare time to try and work on the joint call for action. All of them spent very long days with our Palestinian counterpartners. On the Palestinian side, I would like to mention our partners, Zai Khoury, Amal Masri, Nasser Nasser, Samir Huleila, please rise up, Riyad Kamal, Samir Abed, Kamel Husseini, and Mazin Kopti. Would you please stand up? You now can recognize them. And above all, I would like to thank the man who started it all, the man who grabbed me almost by force every time we have met through the years in international meeting, asking, ordering, begging, pressing, threatening, seducing, pleading. The man who told me time and again that we have an obligation, that we cannot escape our responsibility, that we cannot stand still. The man who promised me that the whole thing can be resolved in 15 minutes. And when I told him that we are already working for a year on this thing, so what about the 15 minutes? He replied, I didn't tell you when you should count the 15 minutes. The one and only Munib Masri. Thank you, Munib. Thank you all. Peace!
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Your Royal Highness Prince Faisal bin Al Hussein, Your Excellencies President Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen, President Shimon Peres, Secretary of State John Kerry, Professor Klaus Schwab, distinguished guests and colleagues. Our journey for this initiative began at the WEF in Istanbul. Our president was there 1 year ago and has brought us here today in the hope that this is not another normal day in the history of Palestinian-Israeli conflict. When I say normal, perhaps the better word is abnormal, since there is nothing normal about conflict, about occupation, displacement, tragedy. We are meeting in Jordan, and we want to acknowledge the hospitality of King Abdullah II ibn al-Hussein. A day after celebrating its independence, the most hospitable of countries which continues to host those who cannot live in their own neighboring lands, and under the auspices of the World Economic Forum, which has a history of hosting peacemakers. And independent members of the business community of Palestine, we are issuing an urgent call to action to all leaders to break the impasse and put as their top priority the serious and expedited pursuit of peace process. This process must end with the establishment in the short term of an independent Palestinian state standing tall alongside the State of Israel, we are joined in this call to action by leading members of the civic and business community of Israel. Palestinians and Israelis have been consumed in decades-old conflict, with Palestinians bearing the brunt of daily hardship and Israel finding itself in the position of occupier, which it cannot continue to justify, neither morally nor strategically, to itself, let alone the outside world. Decades-old wrongs are being addressed throughout this region with varying results. But what is certain is that oppression and injustice are not sustainable. All of us, whether political leaders or everyday citizens, have a chance to be on the right side of history and participate in the bringing about change today. As business leaders, responsible for over a substantial amount of the GDP of both Palestine and Israel, we have decided to take collective stand and upset the status quo, to challenge the sense of complacency, to urge our leaders to act decisively. We have come together as responsible civic leaders to say in one clear voice, enough is enough. Break the impasse. Halt measures that erode the hope of two states. Enter into a determined political process, and we shall support you. We shall support you and contribute in any way we can. We reject the status quo. We will not engage in any normalization under occupation. This is an ethical commitment we made as responsible leaders in this initiative. We will not entertain joint economic or commercial schemes that would legitimize status quo or illegal occupation. The time for action is now. The time for choosing which side of history we wish to be on is now. If we don't seize today, then we have only ourselves to blame for falling into an abyss of eternal conflict, apartheid, and loss of hope. As political leaders, you are asked to heed and lead your people to a better future. End the continuous expansion of settlements. Tear down this terrible wall. Tear down this terrible wall and elevate resolution of this conflict to existential priority. The founder of this initiative agreed at the start we would not enter into substance of negotiations. This is the domain of our respective leaders who must navigate through complex issues and intricate details. The broad outlines of any resolutions are clear and documented in UN resolution and the roadmap and are known by interested parties. Borders along 1967 lines, Jerusalem as a capital for two states, Israel, a capital for two states, Israel and Palestine, a just solution to the plight of our refugees based on UN Resolution 194, and the release of all political prisoners. These are not new ideas. The late President Arafat accepted this painful compromise on behalf of Palestinians for a state on 22% of our historic homeland. Our current president, Abu Mazen, is continuing along this path of peace and has been a trusted, dedicated partner waiting to be joined at the table. The Arab Peace Initiative, endorsed by 57 Arab and Islamic countries, also adopted these positions and offered a historic and strategic vision for peace in our region once the Palestinians achieve self-determination. We are encouraged by your presence, Secretary John Kerry. We are really encouraged by your presence here with us, whose familiarity with this region runs deep. His commitments runs deep, and his efforts to reintroduce the Arab Peace Initiative and promote it as a platform for peace. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. In my life, I have witnessed the agony of the Palestine story, sometimes from near, sometimes from far, from Nakba to Naksa, from Intifada 1 to Intifada 2, from Beirut to Tunis, from internal differences to reconciliation. There is no Palestinian who is untouched by the trial of our people. These events hit me most personally 2 years ago on May 15, 2011, when my grandchild, Munib, Jr., a 23-year-old university student, was shot and gravely wounded by an Israeli armed sniper at a peaceful gathering on the Lebanese border on the Nakba Day. Today, my grandson is on a wheelchair and has asked me Munib asked me to send this message. He tells you he is not hateful, he is hopeful. But he and all Palestinians demand freedom and their state. They will not wait any longer for this. My grandson's story is only one among thousands of stories of Palestinians who had suffered, with the suffering of the young always most difficult to bear. Israeli children and families have also suffered from this conflict. Children are not my enemy or your enemy. Conflict, occupation is our enemy. In the names of those who suffered, we urge the leaders in this room and those represented to end this conflict. Let us show the world what Palestinians can do when freed from the shackle of occupation, and what regional possibilities lie ahead for Israel as a contributor of peace, technology, science, human development in a Middle East that would, the Middle East and the whole world, that would embrace instead of boycott it. After a long life, I have no fear but the fear of God. And my remaining wishes are to see our Palestine free and your Israel free from the wrongs of occupation. Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues for their tireless efforts. Thank you, Professor Schwab, and your outstanding team for giving our initiative a home. And thank all for your support. Thank you very much.
Please stay. May I call now on Mirek Dusek just to read shortly the call for action which has been elaborated by the group.
Thank you, Professor Schwab. It is my privilege to present this call for action on behalf of the Breaking the Impasse initiative. Under the auspices of the World Economic Forum, an expanding group of mainstream Israeli and Palestinian business and civic leaders who are alarmed by the perilous impasse in making peace between the two sides has come together with an urgent call to action. The group calls on political leaders to attach the highest priority towards achieving a two-state solution and an end of conflict between the two peoples. The group takes it upon itself to back such an endeavor and to garner domestic and international support for it. We firmly believe that the desire for ending the conflict and establishing a two-state solution, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace, dignity, security, and mutual respect, reflects the will of the majority on both sides. We are independent, non-political business leaders and leading employers representing a meaningful share of the GDP of both economies. We are deeply concerned that the lack of progress on the political front will reinforce the undesired status quo. Only a viable political solution can allow for the realization of the economic potential and thus significantly advance the well-being of both Palestinians and Israelis and help to establish security and stability on both sides. In times of impasse such as these, the business and civic communities should help to break the impasse. There are ample historical examples indicating the important role of the business community in supporting peacemaking by the political leaderships. We are ready to play such a supportive role and to invest in our common future when the moment comes. Years of failed or incomplete peace efforts leading to the current impasse have fostered a growing sense of despair among the two sides, especially among the young generation, about the viability of an agreed solution. Each side has had its reasons for despair, and each side has a host of unresolved issues of concern that will have to be factored for an end of conflict to occur. The status quo, fraught with shattered hopes, is unsustainable and dangerous. The impasse reduces chances of a historical compromise and empowers extremism, thus threatening our aspirations and future generations. We are concerned that the absence of a permanent solution to the conflict will ultimately result in a catastrophe for both peoples, debilitating economic conditions, unilateral measures undermining a bilateral process, rising Palestinian frustrations due to the inability to realize national aspirations, eroding security, and most importantly, pressures for a one-state reality which will perpetuate the conflict. Therefore, we call on the political leaders to move forward with boldness, courage, and a sense of historic mission to provide a comprehensive vision necessary for resolving all the final status issues in the framework of agreed terms of reference, ending all claims and securing peaceful and good neighborly relations between the two states. We deeply appreciate the role of the World Economic Forum in providing its auspices for the initiative and striving to make the Palestinian-Israeli conflict a priority on the global agenda. We hope the current efforts led by the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, designed to bring about a breakthrough, will bear fruit. We're ready to support his efforts to break the political deadlock. We are heartened by the support provided to this initiative by key actors in the international community and in the region, and we invite all concerned individuals from the Arab, Muslim, world Jewry, and international communities to join our call to break the political impasse. Today, we are going public at the World Economic Forum's meeting hosted by the Kingdom of Jordan, a country which stands firm in support of a peaceful resolution of the conflict. We leave the Dead Sea more inspired to move forward with the World Economic Forum, to expand our ranks, and to carry out public diplomacy with leaders and public campaigns targeting our populations in a bid to engage the widest possible support for this initiative. Let us break the impasse and usher in hope, and let us do so before it is too late. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now call on President Mahmoud Abbas to address us, please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
صاحب السمو
Your Highness, Prince Faisal bin Al Hussein, Excellency President Perez, Excellency Currency Professor Schwab, ladies and gentlemen, it honors me to attend this important meeting, which is sponsored by the World Economic Forum and aims at breaking the impasse in the political process of the Middle East. Most that gives me pleasure in this movement is that it stems from Palestinian and Israeli businessmen who feel that this political impasse needs to be broken. I am pleased that businessmen have realized that the basis of any negotiations and purpose is represented in realization of the two-state solution according to 1967 borders, independent Palestinian state with its capital, East Jerusalem, to live in peace and security alongside the state of Israel. I have warned in the past and in many occasions that the current situation is unbearable. The continued settlement and changing the identity of Jerusalem, confiscation of territories, arrest, detention, and other Israeli practices that are well known to you will lead to closing the opportunity, ending the opportunity of the two-state solution, which is what we notice these days, ladies and gentlemen. Many youth, particularly the new generation, started to lose their confidence in the two-state solution because what they see on the ground makes them truly have no hope in the future that there would be two states, a state of Israel and a state of Palestine, alongside each other. Therefore, we warn that such a desperate stream, and I'm saying desperate, will prevail in the future. This does not represent our policies. We want two states, not a single state. But, however, give people, give the youth, give the new generation the hope before they lose this hope. We cannot accept insulting the dignity of a people that's struggling for freedom and for independence and for practicing a legitimate right to self-determination. Ladies and gentlemen, the Palestinian people is eager for peace after a continuous struggling that lasted for 65 years. We do not teach, we do not preach hatred or discrimination against any of the religions, whether Judaism or other religion. Contrary to that, again, we work on spreading the culture of peace among our children, among our people, and would like to allude to an issue related to instigation, where it is said that there is some instigation that we have in our textbooks, school textbooks, or in the media, or in other places. And this is something that we have examined for so many years, 13 years. When we were negotiating in Wye River, we talked in particular about this issue. And we said, how could we remove all reasons for hatred? How could we remove all reasons for instigation between the two peoples in order to create the circumstances for the future for them to live by their side? And we created a three-party committee comprising Israelis, Palestinians, and Americans that would meet every week to discuss all the kinds of instigation, regardless of its source. We have shown our full willingness and preparedness that anything decided by this committee would be dealt by us with extreme firmness and seriousness. This committee worked for about a year, then it stopped. And in each meeting, at any level, this committee sits on our table of meeting, and we say that this has nothing to do with the political track. This is an important issue, important to us all, and let us reconsider. Let us recreate this committee in order to make it active once again as it used to be. But so far, we have not heard any positive response to our calls. And in order for peace to be comprehensive and just to end the conflict, there needs to be a settlement of all the issues for the final settlement issues, on top of which is the refugees issues, which were displaced from their homeland. Also, there is the portfolio of thousands of Palestinian prisoners who are yearning for freedom through serious negotiations on the basis of terms of reference and specific that are specific, and the time frame that's specific, and would take into consideration the previous agreements with the Israeli governments and the international legitimacy resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. And when we talk about refugees, and we have talked several times about that, and we went into the details of the details. In the past, we've done that, but these days we hear only one word, that we don't want to discuss this issue, that this issue is outside the framework of the negotiation table, although this topic in the Arab Peace Initiative, it is found in a civilized language, in a reasonable, in an acceptable language, where it says a fair and agreed upon solution of the refugees' issues. Nevertheless, what we hear is a single response. And regarding this issue, it needs to be removed from the negotiation table. But how could we do that? I don't know. In addition to the prisoners issue, we have 4,500 prisoners, and there's an agreement between us with the Israeli government to release those prisoners who were detained before 1993, and up to date, this agreement has not been implemented. This written agreement has not been implemented, and the number of those prisoners does not exceed 100. And then we ask why those prisoners are not released, why those are not released, and what we hear as an answer is, why should you give your prisoners for free without any cost? You have released more than 1,700 prisoners, yes, in exchange for shalit. Our answer then, unfortunately, would be, do you want us to abduct other shalits? This is not part of our culture. This is not part of our culture, and we cannot commit an act of this kind. And I would tell you, and particularly to our Israeli neighbors, in 2012, we seized, or we there was several hundred Israeli soldiers who were lost in Palestinian towns and villages. And you'd ask them, where are you going? They would say, we lost our way. Within 10 minutes, those are returned back to their families, to their people, with all dignity and respect. We do not use such means. It is impossible that we would go and abduct anyone. These means are things that we reject entirely. We want to live with neighbors who we respect and who respect us also. Therefore, when we ask to free our prisoners, they say they have to pay something in return. They should need. What return are you talking about? There is an agreement. Okay, let's say we don't have agreements. Why would you keep those prisoners in prison for dozens of years, for decades? Is it to increase hatred? Is it to increase the grudges? Don't we want to coexist with each other? No answer is given. We want a price in exchange for that, and we don't have the price to give. And as I said, we cannot do anything of abduction or by seizing any Israeli. Any Israeli who comes to Palestinian territories is welcome and would go back to their homes safe. The Arab peace initiatives, dear brethren, came with two items. The first one is I have already covered, and the second one is indicated in this document. It says, if Israel withdraws from Arab and Palestinian occupied territories, all Arab countries, here it is, all Islamic countries would recognize Israel and normalize the relations with her. How could we waste such an opportunity? What's only required from you is to withdraw from the territories that were occupied in 1967, and you would get this initiative. This is a 10-year-old initiative. It's unfortunate that I would have to say to our Israeli neighbors that opinion polls say that 70% of Israelis have not read this initiative. This is a valuable initiative, and there is none valuable like it since so many decades. And it came from Saudi Arabia. It came from the King of Saudi Arabia, who says, we are willing, all Arabs are willing, all Muslims are willing if this takes place. So what are we waiting for? We have circulated them in Israeli media, newspapers, streets, in the television, and we urge you and plead with you, just read these 2 pages to see how valuable they are, and we can achieve peace sooner than anyone thinks. Read them. Please read them. Read this document. This is the road. You just withdraw and you would receive recognition from Indonesia to Mauritania and all that is in between the two. All Islamic countries without exception. So why do we waste such an opportunity? I would like to note an issue which is not a subcategory, but it is important, I would say it publicly. We coordinate in the security with the Israeli side, and we are not ashamed to do that, because we want to coexist. It is well known that since 6 years until now, no incident took place, even if simple ones, between Israel and the West Bank. And we used to demand some weapons for our forces, for individual, personal arms, just for soldiers to carry when they carry out their missions. Some some told us go purchase from the black market or go through smuggling. We will not do neither. We will not buy from the black market and we will not smuggle weapons. We want to get what we want in a legitimate manner. We have been waiting since 5 years and until today we have not received any answer. Why? I have no idea. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you realize that Israel could enjoy normal relationships with Arab and Islamic countries if she ends its occupation of Arab territories and with the creation of our independent state with the capital in East Jerusalem, as Munib and Masri said, a capital for both countries, a capital for two states, east part to Palestinians and the western part to the Israelis. And things will remain open between them to indicate the coexistence that we hope to get, that we demand. We want a natural, normal life, normal relationship, and this Jerusalem would be a model for normal and humanitarian relationship between the Palestinian and Israeli peoples. Therefore, let us put an end to illusions. The Palestinian people will not accept a transitional agreement or a state with temporary borders or economic solutions while neglecting the political solutions. We are in agreement, and this respectable man, Mr. Kerry, is here. We agree that the political track and the political economy and security tracks are things that we are willing to go through. However, a state that would have temporary borders that are still living in the minds of some, we hope is something that you will forget. Just forget it. Please forget it. You will not find a national address that would accept this. And by the way, a state with temporary borders, for those who have not read about it, is that we would have 50 or 60% of the West Bank, then wait for 15 years, and after that, we would examine the other issues and deal with them. This is something that will not end the conflict. We want to end the conflict. We don't want to deal with it as if it is something transitional tomorrow and after tomorrow. This solution will not end the conflict at all. It will further complicate it, further make it difficult, and we will go back again and again to so many clashes that we don't want and don't desire. A Palestinian state that we look forward to the creation is a modern democratic state. A state for all of its citizens without discrimination for religion or race, that would preserve the rights of women, where the rule of law prevails, where its institutions operate according to the accountability and transparency. I salute all the participants in this meeting, to our partner in the peace process, President Shimon Peres, and to Excellency Professor Klaus Schwab, and to our dear friend John Kerry, who is exerting tremendous efforts for arriving at peace, and to Mr. Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and the team for organizing this important meeting, which will definitely contribute. Maybe peace would come from here, maybe from these activities, from these events going on here. Maybe are smarter than politicians, because in general, economists are practical people and we talk a lot. you would calculate it, things 1 + 1 is 2, we would just keep on talking. Also, would express our sincere thanks to His Majesty King Abdullah II for supporting the cause of our people, Palestinian people, and for His Majesty's efforts in the establishing just peace, and for hosting the events of this forum, and for supporting this initiative. Thank you. Peace upon you.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Abbas. I now call on President Shimon Peres, President of the State of Israel.
President Mahmoud Abbas, Secretary of State John Kerry, my dear friend Klaus Schwab, I want to thank His Majesty for graciously hosting us under his roof. And I want to thank him also for his efforts and participation to bring peace. Ladies and gentlemen, history is made of biographies of men and women who failed to forecast the future. Borders. We were born in the age of agriculture and reborn in the age of science. This new age changed our agenda and our lives. Depending on the land, divided people. Borders were marked and armies were built to defend them. The yields of the land hang on the travail of the farmers and the grace of heaven that blessed us with rain or punished us with drought. The yields were limited. Science is borderless, and its achievements are limitless. Armies cannot control science. Police cannot arrest innovation. Globality and isolation do not go together. Modern agriculture is cultivated with computers rather than with plows. Science enables us to make 3 drops of water from 1 drop of water. Israel's short of soil and rain has created an agriculture based on high-tech. Israel is sharing its experience with many other countries and is willing gladly to share it with neighbors as well. Israel is moved by developments, not by events. I would say not Israel. History is moved by developments rather than by events. Looking at the developments in the Middle East today, it is blessed with a young generation, one of the youngest in the world. 99 million of its inhabitants are already online. It's not very well known. The young generation uses modern tools to enter the new age. Friends, the Arab Spring voiced by so many youngsters may become an opportunity for jobs and progress. The age of science calls for economic cooperation, educational exchanges, and scientific collaboration. It provided equal opportunities for young and old and equal rights for women. Despite the many hurdles on the way to peace, we must never lose sight of the positive developments in our region. Egypt and Israel made peace. Jordan and Israel made peace. These agreements stand in the test of time. We extend our hands in peace to all countries in the Middle East. There is no country, no religion which we consider enemies. The only enemies are the enemies of peace. The Iranian people are not our enemies. It is the Iranian regime policy which is a threat to all of us. Our region and the whole world cannot accept these brutal regimes' hegemonic ambitions. And the international community cannot celebrate brutal threatenings, weapons, or a norm as a norm for the rest of our life. Friends, we and our Palestinian neighbors must return to the negotiations as soon as possible and really bring peace. President Abbas, you are our partner, and we are yours. You share our hopes and efforts for peace, and we share yours. We can and should make the breakthrough. We should not permit hurdles to overcome it. History will judge us not by process, but by negotiations, and rather its outcome. The today obstacles will pay in the light of peace. The Arab Peace Initiative is a meaningful change and a strategic opportunity. It replaces the strategies of war with the wisdom of peace. We must depart from skepticism and claims the war is inevitable. War is not inevitable. Peace is inevitable. We appreciate the presence of the American Secretary of State, John Kerry, at this gathering. Secretary Kerry brings with him an impressive momentum and desire to contribute to the completion of the peace process. It will be matched with an imaginative economic plan, not instead of the political plan, but as I understand, as an addition to it. President Obama, while visiting our region, offered a new opening for the peace process. Dear John, I know that all sides can count on your determination. The peace process already has a beginning. We have agreed on a common ground to complete the two states, a Jewish state, Israel, and a Palestinian state, an Arab state, Palestine, living side by side in peace, in dignity, in freedom. Friends, we Israelis and Palestinians are aware that peace is first and foremost for us and depends upon us. I'm mentioning because the Secretary says, don't put it on me. Gentlemen, it's your business. I know from experience how difficult these decisions are to be made on both sides, but it is the time we shouldn't miss it. Our leaders must say yes to the future of peace. Our leaders must overcome the difficulties and the dangers and lead their people to a better tomorrow. What holds back the renewal of the peace negotiations are some gaps in the bridge between the beginning and the conclusion. Knowing very well the nature of these missing links, I am convinced that this gap can be bridged. Ladies and gentlemen, there is still an open wound on the map, and this is the terrible bloodshed in Syria. Secretary Kerry is currently trying to bring an end to this tragedy. Israel is not intervening in the Syrian crisis. We support the Secretary's efforts to bring an end to it. We are silent, but not indifferent. There is a need to lower the flames. Ladies and gentlemen, no potential in our region is really count out. The potential is greater than we think. The attempts to release this potential are worthy and needed. We welcome the efforts of breaking this impasse initiative. The fact that hundreds of business leaders from both sides are joining hands to promote a two-state solution and to emphasize the urgency reaching that solution is an important development. Klaus, I know you. Once you have it in your hands, you won't let it down. These people cannot attest to how valuable peace is for economic prospects. Peace should be made between peoples, not just between governments. I am here to express hope and the desire of the Israeli people to bring an end to that conflicts and beginning a peaceful age. Let me say, my dear friend, President Abbas, I didn't answer your arguments, and I'll tell you why. When we started with the PLO, the situation was worse. When I listened to the arguments on both sides, I could say, well, nothing can happen. So all these differences, they are deep, they are moving, they are important. To all of us should be really done around the table. Let's sit together. You'll be surprised how much can be achieved in open and direct and organized meetings. So I don't want to go into any debate. I can see your points. I'm sure you can see our points, but we have a joint point that all of us have to sit together and change it into a peace. I hope that this forum will voice a timely call against skepticism. I know, John, and I know, Tony, you think this is a real problem. Not people are for peace or against peace. They are skeptic if we can achieve it. I pray that it will allow, I hope that this forum, this gathering, will stand up against skepticism. Skeptics don't make history. I pray that it will allow the tomorrow horizon to shine bright, a horizon that will illuminate the fruits of freedom, science, and progress. Let us cast away the divides and suspicions of the past as a future of harmony is before us. We are still writing biography of the unknown future. My friends, it must be a future of peace. It can be a future of peace. Let's do it.
Secretary Kerry, 20 years ago, you joined us the first time at our annual meeting in Davos. And since that time, I have admired you, how much you embodied the spirit which we at the World Economic Forum strive for, the spirit to be committed, truly committed to improving the state of the world. I know your to-do list is very long and getting longer every day, but everybody in this room, as you also have already heard, is grateful that you came back for this closing session of our summit here at the Dead Sea. I know that your commitment is extraordinary, it's crucial, and the floor is yours, Mr. Secretary.
Very, very much. Is there a glass of water anywhere near? Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Klaus, thank you very much for a very generous introduction, and it is wonderful to be here with all of you. I have enjoyed participating in the World Economic Forum for many years, as Klaus said in his introduction. And Klaus, I think everybody here joins me in thanking you for creating this remarkable and important institution. It gives people a great opportunity, and we thank you. I want to thank, let me say, Mr. President Abbas and Mr. President Perez, thank you so much for those comments. I have an agreement here, which you both can come up and sign if you want. We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. Your Royal Highnesses and Your Excellencies and distinguished many guests, I want to first begin just by expressing a very special thank you to His Majesty King Abdullah. I think all of us are honored to be in a hall that is named after his father, who fought hard for peace, and I thank him for his leadership. I thank King Abdullah for his leadership on so many issues in the region. It's also very special for me to be here with President Perez. He is a great friend. For many years, I have been meeting with him in Israel or elsewhere around the world, and I have long admired him for his remarkable, eloquent, and steady leadership. And thank you very much, Shimon, for what you do. I'm also very, very pleased that President Abbas would be here and share his thoughts with us. He, too, is a friend who I have gotten to know better and better. We meet frequently now, and we all count on him to continue to be the essential partner for peace at this critical juncture. Thank you, Mr. President, for being here. It's also a great pleasure to be in this remarkable country of Jordan, and I thank my counterpart, Nasser Judah, who had to get back to Amman. But I thank him for his hospitality always, but more importantly, for his partnership as we navigate these tricky waters. And I want to say a very special thank you to the Quartet representative, former Prime Minister Tony Blair. He has never lost his passion for or interest in peace in this region. He has labored hard in these last years, and he is working diligently on a special project that I want to share with you in a few minutes. I also want to acknowledge Chairwoman Kay Granger, who is here from the United States Congress. She is the chairwoman of the subcommittee on appropriations, and believe me, folks, she is critical to all of us here. I spent the last week traveling through the Middle East and Africa, and I have spoken with national leaders, business leaders, community leaders, and young people. I just had a session with young people at the University of Addis Ababa earlier this morning. And we talked with them, as I have talked with all of these leaders, about the enormous choices that are before us. Weighty decisions that confront us in the aftermath of the Arab awakening, decisions that we need to make and reach before the demographic tipping points just around the corner begin to overwhelm us. No one doubts that this is a very complex moment in international relations. But still, I don't think that there's any secret about the conditions that are necessary for peace and stability to succeed. Those are good governance, security, and economic opportunity. And so the real question for all of us, for President Abbas, President Peres, Prime Minister Netanyahu, all of us, is a very simple one. Will we, despite the historic hurdles, have the courage to make the choices that we know we need to make in order to break the stalemate and provide a change of life for people in this region? How we answer that question will determine whether the popular revolutions that are transforming this region will indeed fulfill their promise. It will determine whether businesses and the booming youth populations across the Middle East and North Africa will realize their potential. It will determine whether we grasp the possibility of peace, which I believe is actually within our reach. I want to thank those who took part and are taking part and will continue to take part in the Breaking the Impasse. My good friends, Munib Masri, whom I have known and worked with and been to some of those private and quiet meetings with him in various places, and Yossi Vardi, thank you, both of you, for stepping up and being courageous. They represent a courageous and visionary group of people, civic and business leaders, Israelis and Palestinians, who have the uncommon ability to look at an ageless stalemate and actually be able to see opportunities for progress. And even as they found plenty to disagree on, I understand they did in the course of their discussions, even as they fully understand the difficult history that is embedded in this conflict, they refuse to underestimate the potential for the future. And that's because Breaking the Impasse's guiding principle is to respect the freedom and the dignity of all peoples. I want you to think about that. And I want to put my comments about the peace process in a larger context, if I can, for a minute. As we all remember, it was the lack of that kind of basic respect that ignited the Arab awakening. It started with a single protest, a street vendor who deserved the right to be able to sell his goods without police interruption and corruption. And then it spread to Cairo, where young Egyptians used their cell phones and tweeted and texted and Googled and called and summoned people to the cause. And they used the social media to organize and demand more jobs, more opportunity, and the liberty to embrace and direct their own destiny. In doing so, these individuals, these individual acts, embraced values that are so powerful that they, against all probability, removed dictators who had served for years, and they did it in a matter of days. Now, of course, there are sectarian and religious and ideological motivations to many of today's clashes that have followed those events, but those events weren't inspired by religious extremism or ideological extremism. They were driven by a motivation for opportunity in the future. And what is fundamentally driving the demand for change in this region is, in fact, generational. It's about whether the massive populations of young people, still growing, has hope that there is something better on the horizon. It's about opportunity, and it's about respect, and it's about dignity. And the aspirations that are driving the extraordinary transformations that began in Tunisia and Tahrir Square, the same ones that sparked what has unraveled into a brutal civil war with some sectarian overtones at this point, those aspirations aren't unique to any one country, they're universal. They have driven all of history. So we ignore the lessons of the Arab awakening at our own peril. And with an important part of the world upside down, it is imperative that all of us channel our creativity and our energy into making sure that people actually do have better choices. The public and private sectors alike, and this is where you all come into this, the public and private sectors alike have a fundamental responsibility to meet the demands of this moment. And one can't do it without the other. We need you at the table, Munib and Yossi and all of you. In fact, this moment in history is actually one of the great stories of our time. But the ending remains unwritten, which is why what we're doing here is actually important. Inshallah, we get to write that ending. And how we do that is what I want to talk to you about here today. We have to remember that the choices being made, whether they're being made north of here in Syria or south of here in Yemen or just across the Jordan River in Jerusalem or in Ramallah or further west in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, they all have something very important in common. They each offer two clear paths that really couldn't be more different, one from the other. And they couldn't have more different consequences. If we don't eagerly grab this moment, we will condemn ourselves to future conflict. We are staring down a dangerous path filled with potential violence, with the capacity to harden divisions, increase instability, and as most here are very, very aware, this will be a path that will be haunted by violent extremists who rush to fill the vacuum filled by the failure of leadership. As King Abdullah said here yesterday, extremism has grown fat on conflict. If we make the wrong choices, or no choices at all, dangerous people will come to possess more of the world's most dangerous weapons. We will face huge pressure on states from growing populations of refugees, just like the camps that are metastasizing just over here on the border of Jordan and Syria. Now, everybody here knows it's not that governments or people will purposefully choose that option. That's not the concern. It's that by failing to choose the alternative and failing to take the risks for peace and stability, those with power will make the worst possibilities inevitable. So what is the other alternative? Well, let me talk about that a little bit. Governments need to pay attention to governance. They need to be open, transparent, and accountable to people. And they need to be seen implementing a vision that addresses the needs of their people. The needs to be able to work, to get an education, to have an opportunity, to be treated with that dignity and respect that brought people to Tahrir Square and to so many other causes in this region. Countries like Egypt, Libya, and Tunisia need to make the right choices. And that is a combination of building capacity for governance, capacity for security, which doesn't exist, capacity to provide jobs. They need to aggressively reemerge into the global economic community. And in making these choices, a significant part of the outcome of the Arab awakening for certain will be defined by government, because the choices that government makes clearly will have an impact on the playing field. As Egypt moves towards the acceptance of the IMF and hopefully works to bring the opposition to the table, Egypt will be far stronger than if Egypt doesn't choose to do those things. But the burden, I want you to know, does not just lie within palaces and parliaments. There's a huge role for business to play here, and a huge opportunity for you to share in the success. No one here should underestimate the degree to which the private sector can promote change and force critical choices, as well as impact the actions of government. The fact is that good governance, peace, and economic development necessarily go hand in hand. And that's why I believe it is time to put in place a new model for development. The old model is one that saw government make grants or give money government to government or invest directly in some infrastructure, some kind of public sector investment. The private sector pretty much did what the private sector thought was in the best interests of the private sector in terms of the bottom line. They did their own thing. So while aid was government to government, there was a sort of division of responsibility, if you will. In this new age, when there is such a greater amount of wealth, so much cash on the sidelines, and where we see so much pressure on governments in terms of their budgets, and where there is still such a great amount of poverty, we need a new model for how we are going to bring order and open up the possibilities to the future. We need to partner with the private sector, because it is clear that most governments don't have the money, and in certain places, the private sector actually has a greater ability to move things faster than government does. Government can facilitate, government can leverage, and in fact, government has gained skills and knowledge about how to do that in ways that we never had 10, 15, 20 years ago. And we can do it with greater skill than ever before. The greater Middle East and many of the countries experiencing the upheaval at this time need to seize on this new model, because the task of building stability by creating millions of jobs is urgent for all of us. Now, one thing I want to make crystal clear, and President Peres mentioned this in his comments: the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is not the cause of the Arab awakening. But this fundamental principle of what economics can do to play a profound role in meeting the needs of both peoples is critical. And that is what we're hoping to do now in the West Bank. As I mentioned earlier, I have asked Quartet Representative Tony Blair and many business leaders to join together, and Prime Minister Blair is shaping what I believe could be a groundbreaking plan to develop a healthy, sustainable, private sector-led Palestinian economy that will transform the fortunes of a future Palestinian state, but also significantly transform the possibilities for Jordan and for Israel. It is a plan for the Palestinian economy that is bigger, bolder, and more ambitious than anything proposed since Oslo, more than 20 years ago now. And the intention of this plan, of all of its participants, is not to make it merely transformative, but frankly, to make it enormously powerful in the shaping of the possibilities of the future, so that it is more transformative than incremental and different from anything that we have seen before. To achieve that, these leaders have brought together a group of business experts who have donated their time, who have come from around the world over the course of the last 6 weeks to make this project real and tangible and formidable, as we say, shovel ready. They've come from all over the world because they believe in peace and because they believe prosperity is both a promise and a product of peace. This group includes leaders of some of the world's largest corporations, I'm pleased to say. It includes renowned investors and some of the most brilliant business analysts out there, and some of the most committed. One of these senior business leaders actually just celebrated his 69th birthday in Jerusalem at the Colony Hotel after spending a 14-hour day in the West Bank trying to figure it out. When others ask them, all of them, why they're here, doing this on their own time, the unanimous answer is, because we want a better future for both Israeli children and Palestinian children. Their plan begins with encouraging local, regional, and international businesses to encourage government leaders in various parts of the world. I raised this issue with the President of China, with the Prime Minister of Japan, with all of our European leaders, and everywhere, with the Brazilian Foreign Minister a few days ago, with the New Zealand Foreign Minister. All of them have on the tip of their tongues the idea that we can make peace in the Middle East and need to, and all of them are committed to be part of this effort in order to change life on the ground. The fact is that we are looking to mobilize some $4 billion of investment, and this team of experts, private citizens, donating their time, are here right now. They're analyzing the opportunities in tourism, construction, light manufacturing, building materials, energy, agriculture, and information and communications technology. This group will make recommendations to the Palestinians. They're not going to decide anything. The Palestinians will decide that in their normal course of governance. But they will analyze and make recommendations on a set of choices that can dramatically lift the economy. The preliminary results already reported to me by Prime Minister Blair and by the folks working with him are stunning. These experts believe that we can increase the Palestinian GDP by as much as 50% over 3 years. Their most optimistic estimates foresee enough new jobs to cut unemployment by nearly 2/3 to 8%, down from 21% today, and to increase the median annual wage along with it by as much as 40%. These experts hope that with their plan in full force, agriculture can either double or triple. Tourism can triple. Home construction can produce up to 100,000 jobs over the next 3 years, and many of them would be energy efficient. Ultimately, as the investment climate in the West Bank and Gaza improves, so will the potential for financial self-sufficient Palestinian Authority that will not have to rely as much on foreign aid. So just think, my friends, we are talking about a place with just over 4 million people in a small geographic area. When you're talking about $4 billion or more in this kind of economic effort, you are talking about something that is absolutely achievable. And I'm happy to say that both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas support this initiative, knowing that just as people find the dignity in a good job, a nation finds pride by functioning and growing an economy that can stand on its own 2 feet. This will help build the future. Now, is this a fantasy? I don't think so, because there are already great examples of investment and entrepreneurship that are working in the West Bank. So we know it can be done, but we've never experienced the kind of concentrated effort that this group is talking about bringing to the table. Now, everyone here also knows how much more can be done if we lift some of the barriers to doing business, build confidence, bring people together. I just ask you to imagine the benefits from a new open market next door, a new wave of foreign investment that could flow into both Israel and Palestine and Jordan, and all of them share it. the effect that could echo throughout the region. And if we prove that this can work here, that can become a model for what can work in other places that are facing similar confrontations. So, my friends, as we gather on the shore of the Dead Sea, a destination unlike any other destination in the world, it's worth noting the key role that tourism could play in all of this. It's just one element of the broad sector analysis that I talked about. But it is one of the best opportunities for both countries, for all of the region, for economic vitality, and for worldwide use of its reputation. Today, the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian territories, attract fewer tourists than Yemen. Even Israel's tourism is not fully met. Until 2011, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria all attracted significantly more tourists than Israel. And despite all the incredible, rich archaeological and religious sites in Israel, Jordan, the West Bank, Gaza, together, they still attract fewer tourists than the United Arab Emirates. There's just no question whatsoever. Ask Tony Blair, ask the people working on this effort. There's no question whatsoever that the powerful combination of investment in business and investment in peace, risks both worth taking, could turn all of this around. Imagine a welcoming part of the world that boasts the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, the site of the tomb of the patriarchs, and the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron, the Western Wall, the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, and more of the world's other great city sites that have drawn tourists and religious pilgrims for centuries. Most importantly, the success of this new approach to development could, in fact, become its own example, its own model for the Sahel, for the Maghreb, for the Arabian Peninsula, and beyond. Foreign direct investment, private investment, leveraged investment, visionary investment has the ability to be able to change the world. Now, maybe you can get a sense that I actually believe in the potential that we have the power to unleash. But this effort, and this is critical to what was said by both of our speakers before, this effort is only part of the answer. And it will not blossom to its full potential without the other critical part of the equation. As we learned in the Arab awakening, as long as prospects for economic advancement remain weak, so do the prospects for peace and stability. But the opposite is true. The economics will never work properly or fully without the political process. The economic approach is absolutely not, Mr. President Abbas, the economic approach is not a substitute for the political approach. The political approach is essential, and it is our top priority. In fact, none of this vision, but it's good to have the vision. It's good to know where you want to go. It's good to know what's possible. But none of it will happen without the context of the two-state solution. And the consequences of prolonging the status quo in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is simply in no one's interest. We are compelled to come here today to the Dead Sea in the context of breaking the impasse to ask, if we don't break the age-old deadlock, if we don't create the conditions for economic opportunity and responsive representative governments, where does all this go? The absence of peace is, in fact, perpetual war, even if it's low intensity. Are we ready? Do we want to live with a permanent intifada? Most important, the Palestinian Authority, to its credit, and credit to the leadership of President Abbas, has taken great risks and invested deeply in a policy of nonviolence in a region where not a lot of people always adopt that in these circumstances. If this experiment is allowed to fail, what is going to replace it. The truth is, that when considering the security of Israelis or Palestinians, the greatest existential threat and the greatest economic threat to both sides is the lack of peace and the ugly realities that are festering under the surface, capable of catching fire at any time. To not try to head these off would be tragic and it would be irresponsible. Now, I have been around long enough, and I have heard all the arguments against working for Middle East peace. It is famously reputed to be diplomatic quicksand. I am familiar with the cynicism and the skepticism. And after so much disappointment on all sides, I can understand exactly where it comes from. So, of course, now, there is huge cynicism about this journey, and it greets any push for peace. But cynicism has never built anything, certainly not a state. It is true that the challenge of peace is formidable, but let me say unequivocally, the necessity for peace is much greater. Indeed, right now, the strategic case for peace, based on the two-state solution, a secure state of Israel and a viable independent state of Palestine, the case for that has never been stronger. We talked earlier about the turmoil in the region. There's a reason for that discussion. Because everyone feels the uncertainty and the instability as the Middle East slowly releases itself from the past and tries to forge a new and a democratic future. It's now clear that the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians is not the cause, as I mentioned, but it's equally clear that the resolution of the conflict would bring enormous gains in the political and social environment of the region and help to symbolize and help to crystallize and help to advance the future of the entire region. Most of all, those who suggest that a two-state solution is already a casualty of years of failed negotiation, and who say that we should search for a new and a different solution. My friends, they have noticeably failed to actually articulate one. And this is for a very simple reason. It is because there is no sustainable alternative solution that exists. A greater Israel that would end up trying to swallow up the Palestinian people could only possibly survive in a state of institutionalized division and discord, a pale shadow of the democratic vision that motivated and animated the founders of Israel. And any attempt by Palestinian politicians to wait out Israel in the hope that somehow, someday, the Israelis will just give up and go away, or that somehow they can win a one-state solution, that will only result in decades of futile confrontation and eventual dissolution, and perhaps worse, violence. So we have no choice but to try again for peace and to find it. We have no alternative to its inevitable difficulty, but of challenging and moving down that path. We have to go down that path. And we should negotiate, recognizing that despite all the frustrations, large majorities in the Palestinian territories and in Israel both support a two-state solution. They support peace. What they need more than anything from all of us is a renewal of hope that peace can actually be achieved. Now, I am well aware that the credibility of anything that is called a peace process right now is at a very low base. I know that. I understand it. But if we give up, we give to those who don't want reform or who don't have the stomach to make the tough choices an excuse for their own inaction. And two great peoples could come to be known not just for their proud cultures and their contributions to history, or their entrepreneurial energy, but they could come to be known for what they failed to do, or even worse, what they refused to do. My friends, beyond all the strategies and all the maneuvering, all the politics, there really are some simple realities. The second graders that I have personally seen and met in Sderot, they shouldn't have to worry about running into a bunker as part of their school day in order to avoid rockets. And the little girls that I saw playing in rubble in Gaza when I visited it 4 years ago, they should be able to grow up in a neighborhood where the playgrounds aren't made of debris and their lives are not determined by terrorists in their midst. And the shop owners that I met in Ramallah, some just the other day, they should know that their businesses can flourish without the restrictions that are placed on them or without the threat of violence. Time is not on anyone's side in this, and changes on the ground could rob all of us of the possibilities of peace. The leaders of the Arab Initiative, as has been mentioned earlier, with whom I met in Washington last month, moved and changed and offered an update of the Arab Peace Initiative. And they are committed to making a dramatic step towards peace. And we all hope and pray that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas don't allow this conflict to outlast their administrations. Negotiations can't succeed if you don't negotiate. We are reaching a critical point where tough decisions have to be made. And I just ask all of you to keep your eyes focused on what can really be done here. Think of all that can change. That's what should motivate us. With renewed and normal relations between Israel and the Arab nations, we could end the regional boycott of Israeli goods. New markets would open up and would connect to one another, and jobs would follow in large numbers. With renewed strength, the new neighbor states of Israel and Palestine could actually become another hub in the Middle East for technology, finance, tourism. Israel and Palestine and Jordan together could become an international finance center, attracting companies that simply won't take that risk today. With a bold, fresh approach, like the West Bank project that Tony Blair is heading up and that we discussed earlier, other things can develop here. In the end, the only way for Israel to survive and thrive as a secure, Jewish, democratic, and economically successful state is through the realization of an independent and viable Palestine. And the only way Palestinians will obtain their sovereignty and the opportunity that comes with it is through direct negotiations with Israelis for a solution of two states for two peoples. And I say to you, President Abbas, no one is talking about temporary borders. We are talking about an end of conflict, end of claims, peace. So I come here today to say at this important gathering on Break the Impasse that President Obama is deeply committed to this solution. That is why he came to Israel, in an effort to try to open up people's minds and hopes and ideas about those possibilities of peace. And I believe that people in both places responded to his call for action. The only way that both states can succeed side by side is with the kind of work that we're doing here today and the kind of work that must go on in these next months in negotiations. The true significance of the Arab awakening isn't about what was torn down, but it's about what the people of this region can now choose to build up. Similarly, the story of the stalemate between Israelis and Palestinians simply can no longer be about all the times that we have been let down by failed efforts. It has to be about the very real ways that we can lift people up, create opportunity, and create the conditions for peace. I think everybody here believes in this possibility, and standing here with you at the lowest point on earth, I believe we can actually reach for the heights, and I hope we will get about the business of doing it. Thank you.
President Perez, President Abbas, Mr. Secretary, I think there's one thing crystal clear here. Breaking the impasse is a necessity. It's an urgency, and the process has to start not only as soon as possible, it should start tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, we were not here just as participants of a final session, listening to the speeches of responsible and responsive politicians, to listen to the report of the Break the Impasse initiative. We are all participants here in forming and shaping our destiny. We are all involved. We all have our duty to go out of this room to be the ambassadors of the message which was crystallized this evening. So I count on you to be the ambassadors of the spirit which we have experienced this evening. We will now proceed in a moment to the final part of this session in the presence of His Majesty King Abdullah II. And we will, I think in a very symbolic way, integrate young people in what we are doing. I think the importance of technology was highlighted again and again. The importance of a multi-stakeholder approach to shape our future was highlighted. But we have to integrate into what we are doing the entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurial spirit, the spirit for innovation of the young generation. And in this respect, I'm very honored and pleased to announce that we will have now a celebration to celebrate and to highlight special innovations done by young people who will receive the King Abdullah II Award for Youth Innovation and Achievement. We will see a video, and I would like to welcome in order to prepare, we have a break for 5 minutes. But please seated. Remain seated.
هون بيشبك خرج برا بيشبك لا هون بالقاع لا بس احنا شيء كثير مش 9:30 على 9 طب يلا خلينا نجمع عشان يلا كلنا نتجمع بقى ونجمع بعض خلونا نجمع بعض اذا بدك تلعب ولا مشينا لا لي هذا شنطة لودي وين شنطة الصوت هاي حطها قدام تمشي مش فتح لا مش واقف بس تبقى مع الإسرائيلية تبع الصوت تورم أول شيء ساعة
Ladies and gentlemen, please take a seat. His Majesty King Gabriel II will arrive. Thank you.
this video.
Sorry?
The friend.
Yes.
Same this case.
Okay.
You can see your friend. And
Yeah.
your back.
This is
No,
my
no,
cable.
no, no, no. My cable. Your
Like
friend.
that?
Yes.
Okay.
Your Majesty, King Abdullah II of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Your Royal Highness Crown Prince Hussein, Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, dear friends. Before we start this ceremony to honor young people who excel in entrepreneurship and innovation, I would like to use this opportunity to thank you, Your Majesty, for the great hospitality you have exercised and which made our meeting so successful and, I should also add, enjoyable. Thank you from all our heart. And I would like to include into my thanks the government and the people of this great country. I now would like to proceed with the award ceremony and would like to ask you to read the paper which describes the purpose of this famous award. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Majesty, Your Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today we have the honor of recognizing the third class of fellows selected for the King Abdullah II Award for Youth Innovation and Achievement. It was with great foresight, Your Majesty, that you launched the award in 2007 to recognize, celebrate, and support talented young men and women throughout the Arab world who are actively contributing to their communities and nation. Already, 20 outstanding young social entrepreneurs from 8 Arab countries have benefited from this distinction. With the support and training they have received from the King Abdullah Fund for Development, these young leaders have strengthened their approaches and expanded their reach, collectively impacting the lives of more than 160,000 people around this region. Each of them serves as a powerful role model for their peers and community members, inspiring countless others to join their efforts. Seated before us today are the 2013 King Abdullah II Award for Youth and Innovation and Achievement honorees. These 10 accomplished young men and women have developed innovative solutions to a host of urgent challenges, leveraging the power of technology to make vital information on healthcare services available in Sudan, promoting entrepreneurship among high school and university students in Jordan, creative avenues for youth to influence the policy agenda in Egypt and in Yemen, and enhancing the opportunities for underserved children in Lebanon and in Egypt. Their solutions are both practical and profound. Imagine hosting a 5-star meal in the dark to raise awareness of the challenges facing the visually impaired, or using dance as a vehicle to heal emotional trauma and build resilience among Palestinian children. With their passion and idealism, the 2013 Kaya Fellows make the world of transforming their societies sound easy, but each has faced profound personal and professional challenges. Many abandoned secure jobs and regular paychecks to pursue their social change visions. Often they were met with skepticism by parents and friends and society at large. Most have spent sleepless nights wondering how they would raise the funding needed to support their work and those who work with them. And all have paused to question whether they had the knowledge and even the skills to deliver on their dreams. These are courageous young men and women who have persevered against the odds to get where they are today. Now, because words cannot truly capture the impact of their work, I am pleased to share with you a video that will take you into the communities where these youth are bringing hope and opportunity.
I started this NGO called the Nawaya Network with the intention to empower disadvantaged youth who had hidden potential, who had talent or skills, but they weren't able to further develop their skills because they were disconnected from all the resources.
SudaMed was created as an initiative to fight the lack of information and the lack of healthcare in our country.
So much violence in Palestine. This violence is leading to trauma. I Can Move, as a project of Yante, we are using community dance to transform this trauma into growth.
The idea behind Dinner in the Dark came from that the visionary people get to dine in the dark with the blind people. The person who can see asks for help from the blind person, where in real life, it's totally the opposite.
يمتاز مشروع التمكين السياسي للشباب اليمني بأنه واقعي ومبني على إشراك كافة فئات المجتمع مثل المعاقين والمهمشين والنساء والعاطلين عن العمل والطلاب بنسب عادلة ومتكافئة.
What we do at Yara is we tackle social issues with fresh thinking to produce solutions that are scalable, innovative, and collaborative.
Educate Me is unique in the sense that it does not regard children as minors, but we do regard them as innovators. We learn from them a lot, and we allow them to take responsibility for everything that happens in Educate Me.
Trip to Innovation came to life when we recognized that the limited natural resources of Jordan will not allow offering employment opportunities for all job seekers. So we thought of innovation and entrepreneurship as solution to face the major challenge that faces youth, which is unemployability.
After 2011, so many people were trying to express themselves through demonstrations, strikes, and sometimes violence. An Al-Wazir project empowers young people through a unique form of progressive activism to participate in the decision-making process in their communities.
مشروع متطوع أربد بيمتاز إنه قائم على الشباب الجامعي. من خلال المشروع الشباب أنفسهم هم المسؤولين عن التخطيط وتنفيذ وإدارة المشاريع بشكل كامل.
Along the way we faced many challenges such as lack of data, lack of knowledge, and even lack of interest. But we as a group never gave up.
Art in general and dance especially are seen to be privileges in a society impoverished like Palestine.
The major challenge that faces any non-for-profit organization is the financial resources, and we tried to overcome this challenge by approaching many partners from the public and the private sector.
The female participation at the beginning of the project was very low, So we designed a raising awareness campaign targeting young females to invite them to participate in this project.
The reason why we decided to produce mini products is to sustain our NGO. Because even though we're an NGO, we have to think in a business manner in order to sustain our mini projects.
The Nawaya Network hopes that by connecting these disadvantaged youth to opportunities, they would be less likely to engage in crime, violence, and drug use, and alternatively, they would have something to focus on that's positive, that helps them build their self-confidence, their sense of self-worth, their leadership skills.
خلال السنتين الماضيات دربنا أكثر من 100 شاب، نفذوا أكثر من 100 مشروع وفعالية، شارك فيهم أكثر من 1000 متطوع، وخدموا بشكل مباشر ما يقارب 20,000 شخص في مدينة إربد.
استطعنا من خلال مشروع التمكين السياسي للشباب اليمني من توقيع 4 اتفاقيات مع السلطات المحلية، حدد من خلالها دور فعال للشباب في اتخاذ القرار، وكذلك توفير الخدمات الصحية والتعليمية لعدد 35,000 شخص من الأسر المهمشة.
I aspire a world, an Arab world, challenge-free to the blind people, with equal rights and access to education, employment, and medical health services.
We would like to have a think tank where young people are coming, sharing their experiences, their ideas for change for a better Egypt.
When asked about the number of volunteers at Yara, I answered that the whole world is one big group of volunteers, because through our online presence, everyone can adapt the same project in their country.
I believe it's very important to dream, but also to act upon your dreams, to start doing something. And you'll be very surprised that while doing so, you'll be attracting the right people to you.
الشباب العربي لازم يؤمن بذاته وبقدراته، ويأخذ زمام المبادرة للتغيير، التغيير الإيجابي اللي بيضمن مستقبل أفضل للجميع.
Working together, creating partnerships, building on existing initiatives. This is what the Arab world needs. The sense of ownership in everything we see around us. It's ours. Go there, take it, develop it further.
When we see those young people, I think we can be very inspired and very optimistic about our future. If we bring to full fruition their dreams, their ideas. I have now the pleasure to invite on the stage, first on my right side, all the nominees for the award, and will afterwards announce the winners. Please welcome all the nominees. May I now ask the patron of this award to join us here, Your Majesty. And I may now announce the winners. Yasmin Mohamed Hilal from Egypt, please. Congratulations. Masin Khalil from Sudan. And Saina Halep from Lebanon. So you are the person who sort of direction.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. President Abbas, President Perez, Professor Schwab, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for making this a successful and productive forum. Our region has a destination today, a strong and stable future in which all our people can thrive. And you and so many others across our countries are the pathfinders. We need a wide path, a sure path, welcoming millions of people to move forward. This is Jordan's choice. Our inclusive, consensual approach is proven. In the economy, Jordan's reform policies have earned global support. Look soon for even more international recognition of our sound investment policies. These and other steps are opening new opportunities for all, especially our young people. Across the region, the potential to bring about real positive change is unprecedented. Let us stay the course together. In every country, in every sector, we are seeing new innovation and enterprise. Let us tackle our remaining challenges and create the opportunities, institutions, and better living conditions people everywhere deserve. Now, this forum has also provided a platform for a creative initiative to support efforts to relaunch Palestinian-Israeli negotiations. Your engagement, people to people, private sector to private sector, regional and international, can help break the impasse. And today, you injected your input directly into the hard work that Secretary Kerry and the key parties have been doing to relaunch final status negotiations. Politicians' efforts need your energy to achieve a two-state solution based on the Arab Peace Initiative. Let us help the parties get on with it. The highest global engagement is also essential to end the Syrian crisis. It is time to show, as well as say, that the world will not condone the destruction and dislocation. The world community must pull together for an immediate end to the violence and a political solution that lets the Syrian people rebuild their future. Refugee hosts like Jordan and homeless Syrians inside and outside their country urgently need global support. Humanitarian aid has been overwhelmed by increased refugee flows. In Jordan, public services and budget resources are being strained. In some places in our north, water, so scarce in our country, is running short. And I speak on behalf of Jordanians across my country, affected by the burden of refugees. The world must step up to its responsibilities and get more help flowing now. My friends, some destinations are global. Peace, security, the environment, economic stability and growth. These are vital interests for all of us. You and your counterparts around the region are helping to set the direction. Your partnerships will help build the path. I wish you Godspeed, and great success. Thank you.